Hello, and thank you for listening to RENEWables, a podcast by BioStar, which aims to explore the current and future energy landscape in America.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to RENEWables. I'm your host, David Smart, Senior Vice President of Sales at BioStar RENEWables. Thank you for tuning into another episode. Pardon my hoarse voice, have a little bit of a cold I'm recovering from. Fortunately, not COVID. So I'm here in the office, and I've also been shouting with excitement because I am so excited to have Marie Bonneau on the show today. Marie, thank you so much for coming on. It's great to see you.
Oh, thanks for having me, David. Great to see you too.
Absolutely. And some of your followers might know you better as Zero Waste Chef. You touch on a lot of topics that are near and dear to our heart here at BioStar. As you know, and I think a lot of our listeners and viewers know, we have a food waste digester out in San Bernardino, California, that's in the sort of final stages of commissioning. And we divert a lot of food waste from landfills around Southern California. They bring the waste to us, throw it in our digester, and we make renewable gas and electricity there. And then we also make our patented Super 6 fertilizer. So these are topics that we love to feature on the show. And Marie, you've done such an amazing job of building a really impressive following. I love reading and following your blog and your social accounts. There's so many useful and practical tips for being sustainable in the kitchen. So let's get started. Tell our listeners and viewers just a little bit about yourself and your journey and how you came to found Zero Waste Chef.
Oh, sure. Well, I've always been a foodie. Well, at least in my adult life. Not so much when I was younger. So a little bit obsessed with food and cooking. And back in 2011, I started reading about plastic pollution in the ocean swirling around. Animals are ingesting it, they're getting entangled in it, they're feeding it to their young, and it's really heartbreaking. And a lot of it is for stuff we don't actually need. And so I decided right then that I wanted to break up with plastic, but I wasn't sure how to do that. Focusing on the plastic made me focus on all the waste. And then I discovered that in the US, up to 40% of our food goes uneaten, 40% of what we produce. And that was just astonishing. And so, I kind of became obsessed with just using everything, seeing everything as a resource. And it just snowballed from there, continues to evolve. And then my daughter actually started a blog first. She was 16. It was called the Plastic Free Chef. Then she went away to school. And she didn't really have time to keep it up. And I said, well, can I take it over? Because I loved her blog. I didn't want to see it just disappear. And
Sure.
She said, no, start your own blog. So I started my blog. That was back in 2014.
Awesome.
And
That's
then
so cool.
Kind of grew.
And I see also, well, first of all, I love what you said, breaking up with plastic. I love that. And it's hard to do. And I think as soon as you start to try to do it, you really realize how much plastic we use. I use a reusable water cup, but that's just one little thing, right? So, and I see that you have a book. I actually have not read the book, but I certainly plan to. When did you write the book? Was that kind of early on as you got started, or was that as things progressed and you sort of built up your following?
Well, the book came out in 2021, so
Okay,
last
awesome.
year, and worked on it for a couple of years, and then really my blog, I sort of had, because I work in publishing, and I thought, oh, it'd be nice if this became a book someday. So I sort of looked at the blog as kind of a draft,
Mm-hmm.
for a book. But I didn't know what kind of book. But anyway, so yeah, that's when that came out last year.
So tell us a little more about the book.
Oh, so it's called The Zero Waste Chef. Uh, Sustainable tips. No, gee, I should know what the subtitle is. Anyway, The Zero Waste Chef is the name of the book. And so it has 75 recipes. They are vegetarian and vegan. Um, and I have some upfront chapters on, reducing waste in the kitchen. So let's see. I have, why it's a good idea to reduce your waste. I have the kitchen equipment that you need, which is really minimal. So I like to own, less stuff. So I'm not big on kitchen gadgets. I mean, I do have a few that I love, but I don't have all of them. I have a chapter on fermentation. I'm obsessed with fermentation. Let's see, a chapter on cooking methods. Then I have the recipes. So I have staples and scraps, and breakfast, sides, dinner, desserts, and drinks and snacks.
So you and I spoke a little bit before this and had some topics, but one of the things we did not talk about, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, is fermentation. Talk to me about that and why you're obsessed with it.
Oh, well, for one thing, it all tastes delicious. It tastes so good. All of the expensive good stuff is fermented,
Hmm.
or at least a lot of it. So, cheese and beer and wine, kombucha, vinegar, chocolate, it requires fermentation at some point, pickles, kimchi. So it's a great way to preserve food if you have a glut of cabbages for some reason. Maybe you're growing some in the garden. If you don't do anything with those, eventually they'll just rot and decompose. But if you ferment them, which basically means you chop them up, you add salt, you squish them a bit, and pack them into jars. The lactic acid bacteria on vegetables, they eat the carbohydrates and they produce gases and acids and they preserve the food. It's not indefinitely like canned food, but you have the good bacteria. So canned food kills the bad bacteria, but also kills the good bacteria. So fermentation preserves the food. It tastes delicious. It's good for your gut. It's way less expensive to do on your own. I
Cool.
make, let's see, on the counter right now I have vinegar, kombucha, I have tapachi, which is made of pineapple scraps, delicious drink.
You beat me to it. I was going to ask you what are you currently fermenting? That is so cool. It's a topic I'm not all that familiar with, but my wife and I both love to cook, and that is something
Ah,
that I think you've inspired me here to go and try for myself. So I'm sure I can find info on the blog or in the
oh
book
yeah.
about how to do that. And I look forward to that. And, one of the things actually at BioStar, we wanted to really make sure we kind of practice what we preach. We started a company composting,
Mm.
hired a composting service here, local Compost KC. They come around once a week and we encourage folks to kind of bring their food scraps from home and obviously anything that we, left over from lunch and things like that. And I, you talk about when you focus on plastic and think about how much plastic you use, you notice, gosh, it's really a lot. Same with food scraps, right? As soon as I started composting sort of back in like January, maybe December, and I just immediately realized how much food you throw away, and not just good food that went to waste, but the scraps and all the other things
Mm-hmm.
that you
Mm-hmm.
can compost. And it's made my trash a lot lighter. I'm in charge of the trash at home. So that's one benefit. But also to your point earlier, that nearly I think some estimates are even just over 40% of the food produced in this country gets wasted. And we have some information on our website about that. And you look at all of the water that it took to produce that food, and therefore that water was essentially wasted. And it really is kind of an amazing snowball effect that has. And so I've noticed also, just beyond composting and noticing how much I'm now not throwing in the trash. You also have some really good tips on your site about, ways to make sure that you don't end up throwing it in the trash. Prepping food when you get it home from the store makes you more likely to eat it, right? Washing your berries as soon as you can and having them in a nice Ball's food jar, or tips like that. So I've really loved those little tips and tidbits that are really relatively easy to implement into your kind of patterns in the kitchen. But talk about how reducing your food waste saves money. And this is really a timely topic right now, right? With record inflation. And so let's get into that a little bit and talk about how you save money by reducing food waste and being more conscious in the kitchen.
Oh, right. Well, before food prices shot up, the statistics were the average family of four in the US spends $1,800 on food that they don't eat every year. So I'm thinking with prices that maybe that has gone down a bit. I think people, I imagine, are being more conscientious of their food waste. But, even if it went down by 25%, which I doubt it has, it's a lot of money. So, yeah, right
sure.
there.
And if prices are up 30%, then
right.
You probably still spent, wasted the same amount of money. So, sorry, continue.
That's true. No, that's a good point. So yeah, it does save money. It also saves time, because if you eat all of the food you buy, then you shop less. So, I've been obsessed with food waste for a while now, and I can't think of a downside to eating all the food you buy. Unless
Absolutely.
you only buy Twinkies. And then,
right.
And then you have other problems.
Well, that's great. And some of the other, talk a little bit about kind of, I guess, other tips you have for people to really, and frankly, we go to the grocery store and we have sort of our standard order, right, for the week. And we're not, my wife and I we don't go to the store every day. Some people seem to go like every day or every other day. We're more of kind of a once a week. We kind of buy what we need for the week. And our standard order is usually around $100. I've noticed, I truly think it's gone up 30%. It's anywhere now, I think, from $125 to $130. But I guess talk about some other tips, if you can, on how to save money while food prices rise. And actually, to go a step further, there's some obviously timely topics right now: the avian flu, the war in Ukraine, that are really feeding the fire, if you will.
Oh yeah.
But any quick tips you have, I think, are super interesting.
Okay. Well, I'd say my number one tip is to shop the refrigerator first and pantry. So before you go shopping, look at what you have on hand, and then let that determine what you're going to cook next. So instead of saying, oh, what do I feel like eating tonight, and looking online or through cookbook for a recipe, jotting down all of the ingredients and going and buying all the stuff and bringing it home and cooking the meal, it's like the show Chopped. You look at what you have on hand and say, okay, what can I make with this? So if you start there, and then if you need something, then go shopping. But you probably have enough on hand to at least make something. And if everybody did that, they would absolutely slash their food waste. They'd use more of the food they buy, and they'd save a lot of money. So that would be my That's like my number one tip.
I
Another
I
tip,
love that. Please.
oh, thanks. Another tip is, you don't have to make anything fancy. I think people, they see the food blogs and the magazines and the cookbooks and the cooking shows, and they think, oh, I've got to cook this, Michelin star type dinner every night. I mean, it's just not realistic. Nobody has time for that. So, just keep it simple. You just need fresh ingredients. You can have
Well,
a grain bowl or soup. I make soup about once a week to use up all of the vegetables that we haven't eaten, and it's always delicious. It's really easy. I can make it quickly.
healthy.
Saves. Oh, super healthy, yeah, because it's just a bunch of vegetables and some.
Yeah.
I throw in some beans and
I
yeah.
love that. Those are both really resonating with me. My wife, who is a much better cook than I am, shout out to Jacqueline. I'll say, oh, we don't really have anything to eat. We need to go to the store. And she's like, no, we have stuff to eat. You just because you look in the fridge and there's not something that you can immediately pull out and
Oh
stick a
yeah,
fork
yeah.
into does not mean that we don't have anything to eat, right? So and then to your point about simplicity, some of the best home cooked meals she makes for us are super simple. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so good, so good. And she's like, babe, it was easy, it was simple, And I think also having a kid has made me sort of reflect more because I'm not a person who is obsessed about eating 3 meals a day. But when you have a baby and they start eating and they recommend 3 meals a day, you start to really think about, okay, what, I don't want to just throw a bunch of chicken nuggets in the oven every time that she's hungry, right? And so I think she has kind of helped me realize she likes with the baby, the simpler the better. It seems like the
Mm-hmm.
healthier the better, the more vegetables the better. So maybe I'm just lucky, and maybe that will change as she grows more of a perception of what vegetables are. But hopefully not, because she loves eating her veggies, and I always, if I'm kind of stressed about what to make for dinner, it's like, just keep it simple. Some sweet potato, some broccoli, some vegetables. So those are all really resonating, those points. And I think they're really great tips. So you are in California, right?
Mm-hmm.
A
Yep.
leader in the country in addressing food waste, leader in a lot of things, but um, you have a new law out there, which of course at BioStar we're very aware of, given our food waste digester. But Senate Bill at 1383, a new law in California that has finally actually gone into effect as of this year, and the goal of the law is to reduce landfill organic waste, excuse me, from going to landfills by 50%. So talk a little bit about how this, I know you obviously compost probably quite extensively, and that probably wasn't new for you, but talk a little bit about how SB 1383 is having an impact on what you do.
Well, I do compost. Been composting for decades now. And I have 2 bins in the backyard, and our soil is like clay. It's really poor soil, and I have some raised beds, but I need compost. I need all the compost I can get. So I put our bins on Share Waste, which is an app. It's kind of like Match.com for food scraps. So if you have
Okay, cool.
eligible food scraps, then you look for someone who has a bin, and then you contact them and say, hey, would you like my food scraps? So hardly anyone ever contacted me, and then that bill went into effect.
Mm,
And now I have 3 people coming over regularly with their food
awesome.
scraps. Yeah, so I mean, that tells me right there that the law is having an effect already.
Sure.
Now, where I live, we have a food scraps program. So people have been separating their scraps for a few years here. And our garbage bins are split. One side is for garbage and one side is for food scraps. But I don't use it because I want all the food scraps. So they're, I don't think there was too much grumbling here over the new law because people were already doing it. I think
Sure.
that's the case for most of the cities around here. So that's good. But yeah, it's great. And then the compost, I guess, depending on which city you live in. But in San Francisco, it goes to farms. Here, it goes to feeding livestock. So it's really important because, as you said, when we waste the food, we're not just wasting the food. We're wasting all of those resources that went into growing it. So the water and the energy and the labor, and we're clearing land of trees that would have been sequestering carbon, but instead we're chopping them down to grow food that goes uneaten. So it's really crazy problem. And meanwhile, tens of millions of people don't have enough to eat in this
Yeah.
country. So
Yeah. And the food insecurity, is something that is obviously getting a lot of attention right now. It should get a lot of attention all the time, but it's getting a lot of attention right now, given inflation and rising food prices. And the only other thing I would add to that is there's still nutrients in the scraps, right? And
oh
that's what
yeah, yeah.
our digester does. And your compost, you use it, it sounds like, to grow fresh produce and things in your garden. So it sounds like you have a garden at home. Tell me what's in your garden.
Oh, well, it's small, but let's see. I have tomatoes. The tomatoes are doing well. I threw some corn down just to see what would happen, and it's growing like crazy.
Nice.
I have black beans they're also going crazy. Luckily, someone gave me a trellis last year, free trellis, so I put that there, and they're going all over the place. What else do I have? I have zucchini, which I didn't plant too much because zucchini grows like crazy. I have some herbs and some melons. And a few other things I'm forgetting. Oh, honey nut squash.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they're delicious.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
There is nothing like going out to the garden and picking your produce and coming inside and fixing it for dinner. I just think
Oh
that is
yeah.
so
Yeah, yeah,
fun.
yeah.
And my wife's family, a lot of them live out in Maine, and her grandmother has just this like amazing, huge garden. And their squash, for example, they take it and freeze it for the winter. I mean, they just are
Mm-hmm.
so good and resourceful. And I mean, probably more than 50%, maybe more, of the produce that they eat, regularly comes from their garden, which I just think is so
Wow.
cool.
Oh yeah,
Um,
that's amazing.
it's a for what it is, Grammy Steves is out there, running the garden. It is very substantial. It always amazes me that she is able to keep up this amazing garden. So there are some other related topics, excuse me, I want to get into kind of before we close out. And you mentioned it right at the top of the show. Um, Plastic waste. I think it's really related to this conversation. Sounds like it's sort of how you and your daughter started your journey into zero, which eventually became Zero Waste Chef. But talk about the importance of minimizing plastic waste. I know you have a great article on the blog about 50 ways to kick plastic waste. Talk about the importance of that and some of the things our listeners and viewers can do to kind of dive into that and challenge themselves to use less plastic.
Okay, well, it's important because pollutes all along its life cycle. So it's not just disposal, which is a complete disaster. I mean, it's a catastrophe. It's bad. And China, when China stopped taking our plastic waste, and why should China take our plastic waste? It was like a reckoning. So now some cities are burning the plastic, they're incinerating it, and it's made of fossil fuels. Big oil, they see the writing on the wall that, oh, cars are becoming electric and we're going to electrify the grid. So they want to still sell their products, so they're pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into building more plastic plants so that they can use their fossil fuels. More plastic is mind-boggling that we could actually have more. So it pollutes when it's extracted and refined. It's full of toxins, and you don't want your food to come in contact with it. I mean, I could go on and on and on about it. And
keep going.
Oh, okay. Well, tea bags. So I was talking to someone the other day about tea bags. I wrote a blog post this week on how to make iced tea. Those silky tea bags, they look like silk. They're not silk. They're plastic. They're synthetic. There was a study out of McGill University in Montreal a few years ago now. When you brew a cup of tea with one of those bags, there are 11 billion pieces of microplastic in your 1 cup of tea. And to put that into perspective, a bottle of water has about 40 pieces of microplastic, which is also disgusting. We ingest about 5 grams of plastic a week. That's about a credit card. Credit card weighs about 5 grams. It's in our blood now. So that really got people's attention. A study came out in May, showed that plastic particles are in our blood. They're in the umbilical cords and placenta of babies. They're in every spot of the earth. They are raining down on us. We are breathing them in. I mean, it's awful. But, there has been some progress on changing that. When we started this, when Mary Catherine and I first decided we would go plastic free in 2011, occasionally there'd be a news story on plastic pollution and we get all excited, like, look, it's in the news. And now it's every day. So it's in the news all the time. And if any of your listeners want to start, Plastic Free July is a great time to start. The woman who started that 11 years ago, also in 2011, she visited a recycling center and she saw all of the plastic just whizzing by the conveyor belt and the workers sorting it. And she thought, that is my plastic and my neighbor's plastic, and this is horrifying. And she asked her friends, what do you think about giving up plastic for the month? And a few of them said, okay, yeah, sure. And they did it, and last year over 300 million people did Plastic Free July. So
wow.
Yeah, and you don't have to, actually you can't cut it all overnight. It's just too hard. It's like going on a diet and saying, okay, I'm not going to eat anything. That's my diet. I mean, you can't sustain it. So you just start small. And so I would start with what Plastic Free July calls the top 4. And those are items that are everywhere. You see them everywhere, but they're also easily replaced. So bottled water. That's a pretty simple one to change. Unless you live in Flint, Michigan, where you can't drink the water, people they spend like millions and millions, probably billions, on bottled water because of marketing. They're scared. Marketing has told us, oh, our water isn't safe. And then you won't drink the microplastic either that's in the bottle. So you'll save a fortune, you'll cut the plastic, bring a water bottle with you wherever you go. Keep one at your desk and, just fill it. So it's totally doable. Um, to-go coffee cups. So those are lined with plastic. So, you can, depending on the cafe, because of COVID, you might be able to take your thermos or your reusable mug and have them fill it. So my favorite cafe stopped doing that during COVID, but I found a different cafe. So I go to a different cafe now. You could also brew your coffee or tea at home and take it with you. And you'll save a lot of money if you do that. Straws are easily replaced for most people. They can, just put the cup or glass to their lips. And if you do need a straw, for a medical condition, because nobody wants to take straws away from people who need them, then, you should be able to get a straw. But for most people, then just drink from the cup or get a reusable straw. And then the last thing, the fourth item, is plastic bags, including produce bags. So I have very simple produce bags. I usually have, here's one. They're just very simple, and I keep them stashed in my shopping bag, and then I always have them, or shopping bags rather. And so those four things will absolutely slash plastic waste. I mean, these produce bags alone, Mary Catherine and I first sewed some, and you can also buy them. You don't have to sew them. You can buy them all over the place. Let's see, we first made some in 2011, and I've been using them ever since. Every week at the farmer's market, I take 10, so that's thousands of plastic bags.
Yeah, absolutely. My wife and I, she taught me a long time ago that I was not washing our produce well enough. And so I washed the produce pretty well. And I just stopped using the bags altogether. Some people kind of think, I think it's gross. I just put it in the cart, it's fine.
Yeah.
And
No,
I get home,
true.
I wash it anyways. So it's like, I just put it in the cart. And then too, we have some really neat little, reusable bins in our refrigerator that we kind of sort the produce in, and it helps kind of keep the fridge organized, and you can just wash those if they start to get dirty. So I love those tips. Those are definitely, I think it's a great tip to kind of focus on the big four. I don't require a lot of straws. I don't drink a lot of soft drinks, but the produce bags, that one hits. And I always make sure, I'm a big fan of my Yeti coffee and water cups. And we try to do that. If you also, to our listeners and viewers, check out, I think it was episode 36 of the podcast, a guy named Mark Harama, who developed a fascinating technology taking microorganisms from the ocean and creating biodegradable plastic alternative straws and spoons and forks. And those products can be found in places like Shake Shack. You can buy them at Target. So definitely go check out that episode. It was called Air Carbon is the product name. And really, really cool thing that Mark is doing to help combat plastic waste. So Anne-Marie, this has been so much fun. I love everything you're doing, and there's so many little things. I like the tip of start small. You don't have to go all at once. I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
So are you totally plastic free?
Pretty much.
What are the things that you can't avoid? I guess that's my question.
Okay. Well, it's more like things I choose not to avoid.
Sure.
So the one big thing is milk for my tea.
Okay.
So I buy it in returnable, refillable glass bottles, but there is a little plastic ring around them. So there are those. But I'm pretty hardcore.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I wash my hair with a shampoo bar. Or, I was using baking soda early on, but it's a little bit harsh. But yeah, shampoo bars, which you can get everywhere now. When we started, it was really hard to find them. and they
Cool. I've
weren't that
never even
good.
heard of it, so I'm
Oh
gonna go find
yeah,
one. I love
yeah.
that.
I
Can you
mean,
find? Do most like brands make a shampoo bar alternative?
no, not like the super, not like the commercial brands.
Sure.
Um, so
That's
let's
cool. I'm
see.
gonna look into that. I
Oh
like that
yeah,
idea.
yeah. You can get them at Whole Foods.
Okay.
Let's see. I mean, you can find tons of them online. We get ours, well, from different places. So there's a co-op sort of health food store near
Hmm.
us, and they have really nice shampoo bars. I was on a trip recently and went to see my daughter in Montreal, and I visited this woman's shop. She makes all of her own soap. She's a chemist, and she gave me a shampoo bar. And my daughter, my other daughter, bought me a shampoo bar. I have like 3 of them right now. People keep
Awesome.
giving me shampoo bars. They're great because they're concentrated soap. There's no plastic bottle. Some of them have zero packaging. You know, some of them have a little paper strip around them
Sure.
with the name of the company, but they're not wrapped in plastic, and they're because the shampoo bottle, it's so much plastic.
Oh
It's
yeah.
the
Yeah, and they're thick
the
and
giant hunk of thick plastic. Um, and I brush my teeth right now with these toothpaste tabs. I've also
okay.
used baking soda. I'm not a dentist though, so look into what you feel comfortable using. But the toothpaste tabs are great. You just crunch on them, and they foam up, and you brush your teeth. It's mostly the toothbrush that cleans your teeth.
Yeah.
And, you know.
Super interesting.
Um.
And I have one more question because I'm geeking out.
Oh, okay.
You mentioned tea, and we drink a lot of tea in my house.
Mm.
And I'm all nervous now about these 40 billion microplastics or 4 billion in my tea bag. So, um, do you use loose leaf tea?
Yep.
Okay.
Loose leaf. It's delicious too. It
Yeah,
tastes
I think it
better.
is too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
really good.
Awesome.
So you can either put put the loose leaf in a tea infuser and put that in your cup and add the boiling water, or you can put the infuser in a teapot, or you can even just throw the tea leaves in the teapot, make the tea, and then use a strainer when you're pouring the
Sure.
tea to catch the tea
Well, I
leaves
have
in.
this awesome little teapot that has the tea
Oh, the
loose leaf
built-in
tea infuser
strainer.
in the middle,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't use it enough. So I'm gonna
Oh
dust
yeah,
that
yeah.
off
Now,
after this episode.
not all tea bags have those, billions of microplastics. That's the silky ones, but even the paper ones that have a seal around them, there's some plastic in the sealant. In most of them. I mean, some of them, because this information came out a few years ago or several years ago, so some of them have tried to change, but some of the paper itself also has plastic in it. Like, it's just too much work to figure out which brand is.
Sure.
So just buy loose leaf. It tastes better.
I love it. That's a great tip. Anne Marie, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show. I love following you. Please tell our listeners and viewers how they can find you online, how they can stay up to speed and kind of continue developing some of these super important and sustainable practices into their everyday lives.
Oh, sure. Let's see. So my website is zerowastechef.com with the zero spelled out, Zero. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of them are at Zero Waste Chef. So
Awesome.
easy to remember.
We will put those social handles and your website in the show notes so our listeners and viewers can easily click through and find you. And let's definitely stay in touch. I hope you'll come back on at a later date for another episode. Love the
Oh,
conversation
sure.
and
Yeah, me too.
really appreciate your time.
Oh, well, thank you, David. This was fun.
Thank you. This has been another episode of Renewables. Again, I'm your host, David Smart from BioStar Renewables. Thank you to all of our listeners and viewers who continue to tune in. We're seeing some awesome growth in the podcast numbers and really, really appreciate you spending some time with us. Have a great week, everybody. And Anne Marie, thanks again. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, David.
Hello, and thank you for listening to RENEWables, a podcast by BioStar, which aims to explore the current and future energy landscape in America.